Hello, welcome back to Corelyzer. This tutorial will describe the basics of loading core section images in Corelyzer. Before proceeding, you'll need to know the resolution and orientation of your image files. Resolution is measured in dots per inch or DPI. This value is determined when the physical cores are scanned and should have been provided with your images if you didn't scan them yourself. Orientation is either horizontal and or vertical and can be easily determined by viewing an image. So in the case of my set of images here, I already know that their resolution is 508 dpi, and by simply looking at a few of them, you can see that they are all much wider than they are tall, which means they are horizontally oriented. You should also confirm that the names of your image files are named in such a way that Corelyzer can automatically arrange sections into tracks. Corelyzer looks for one of two naming conventions. The first is the IODP convention, which consists of an expedition, a site hole pair, a core tool pair, and a section number. And the LACOR convention, which is very similar, it just adds between expedition and site hole a lake year pair. So if your files are named according to either of these conventions, Corelyzer should deal with them fairly nicely. Mine are named, of course, according to the LACOR convention. You can use either hyphens or underscores to separate the components of the file name. Generally, it is a bad idea to mix the two, so use one or the other. Mixing may lead to strange results and cause you more trouble. Finally, before we get started with loading images, it's much easier, or it's generally easiest to have all of your image files in the same directory. It's just going to make things a lot simpler. So let's get started. If you open up Corelyzer, first thing we'll do is under File, go to Load Images and open Local Image Files. Now select whatever images you would like to load. In my case, I'm going to choose 7A and then the first three sections of 10A. Multiple selection is of course allowed here. You can control click. Whoops, screwed that up. Multiple selection is allowed, as I was trying to say. You can shift click to select a range. You can hold on control to toggle individual selections. That would be command on the Mac. Shift clicking works the same way. So select whatever subset you want. Again, I will reselect this one and then hit open. The next dialog. The upper portion has two DPI fields and an orientation pop-up. It has a DPI X and Y. In almost all cases, these will be the same. I know that mine are, I have 508 for both. So when I type in 508, because they're almost always the same, as soon as I click out of this field, if DPI Y is empty, it will pull that value in. So I don't have to type it. Just makes things a little bit easier. If your DPI Y value was something other than 508, just put it in here and it will apply. But it is 508 in this case. So that's the upper section of the dialog. The lower section is where things get a bit more interesting. This indicates Corelyzer's attempt to arrange your sections into tracks. So tracks are identified by their beige background, which may be a little hard to see, and also the word track at the beginning of their name and being surrounded by brackets. The items directly below each track indicate the sections that will be part of that track. So here you see I have 10A sections 1, 2, and 3, and they're under track 10A, which is exactly what I want. The same goes for the single section of 7A, 8A, and 9A. They're all in the correct place. If somehow something were wrong, or if I wanted to do something a bit non-standard, you can make adjustments by using the move up and move down buttons. So for instance, if I wanted section 3 of track 10A to be at the bottom of track 9A, I can select it, click move down, and move it into track 9A. So as it stands now, it would be the zero depth, the first section in 9A. If I move it down one more, it will now be the lower section of 9A. So you can manipulate things as you wish using those commands. You can also create new tracks if you want, and you can rename that track to something more sensible using the rename track button. Track. If you decide you don't want that track, you can of course just delete it. So using those tools, once things are arranged in the way that you like, I'm going to move section 3 of 10A back to where it belongs. Click the next button, and it will take you to one last dialog, and this dialog is primarily for review purposes. This indicates where Corelyzer will place your cores in the track. So as we mentioned before, the only track with multiple sections is 10A, and as you can see, sections 1, 2, and 3 are right here, and the first one is at depth 0, as you would expect. The second starts immediately after the first. The first is 0.41 meters long, so section 2 will start at 0.41 meters. Similarly, the third section will start immediately after section 2, so they will abut each other once loaded if Corelyzer does its job right. The remaining sections, because they are all the only section in their track, all begin at depth 0. So review these values, make sure they look sensible, and assuming they do, we can finally start loading them by clicking the Finish button. So now the loading process will begin, and this is going to take a little bit of time, but you'll see as each image is loaded, it will pop up and appear in the canvas. So first we're loading the 3 sections of track 10A, so we should see one more or 2 more pop up here. So the reason it takes a bit of time to load these is that the first time any image is loaded in Corelyzer, it's processed into an internal format that can be read very quickly, unlike the original image file, which is quite large and could not be loaded in an efficient manner at all. This process does take some time. Depending on the number of images and their size, initial processing can take a few seconds to several hours. Corelyzer only needs to do this process once. Already processed images should load very quickly. And you can see the progress of image processing in this status bar, but image processing is now complete. So there's no status there. So finally, now that these images have been loaded, if you're concerned about the accuracy of your DPI value, or even if you're not, it's good to just confirm, because if your DPI values are off, all of your core lengths will also be off, and basically everything will be off, and you'll have all kinds of trouble. So it's good to confirm that your DPI was correct. The easiest way to do this is if your images have a ruler on them, it's extremely easy. You can simply compare the image ruler to Corelyzer's ruler, and you can see here that 10 centimeters on this core corresponds nicely with the 10 centimeter hash mark in Corelyzer. So we apparently got the DPI correct. That's all for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we will look at how to actually manipulate the images that we've loaded and do some interesting things with them. See you next time.